All right, there we go. And we can see at this point, right? Recording's good. Yeah. We see at this point we kind of left off from the other day, right, where we've kind of got our painting available, right? Now, in this case, I've got the gear on and the gear crab color selected right here. Remember, kind of these will allow you to switch to your different layers. Well, currently in Blender, not so much layers, but your different textures, right? Initially, when you first create them, though, remember you have to kind of go up here, save, make sure it's active here for saving. So what we want to do here is we want to do our, just show you a little more about image painting. And I want to show you guys how you can do a metal map, basically a roughness map, right? Just so you can see that there's more than just color maps and normal maps. So we're not going to do a lot, but, you know, it can kind of be for the rivets here. So what I'm going to do is I'm really just going to go in here and kind of show you the difference again between stencil and viewplane, right, and how those will give you different results. So in this case, of course, I've got my brush on here. I think I'm going to go for a lighter color here, just so that I've got a little bit of kind of tinting, and that's kind of match more this. So remember, you can go up to your color here. I'm also going to switch from, because I had this kind of on from last time, right? Mix is kind of the good default, right? So if you go right up here, right below the texture paint, kind of workspace tab, remember there is something called mix. And if you click on that, you have a bunch of different blend modes for your brushes, right? And mix is kind of the default, right? That's kind of doing the normal painting. And you remember right next to that's color, so you can kind of click on that and pick your color if you want to, kind of adjust the value. And of course, I'm going to go to texture here, right? So remember, if we go further over, we see there's an actual little texture button there. Now, remember, there's new, but there's also this kind of like white checkerboard, right? Kind of white and black checkerboard we can click on. And this will load in any images that we might have had loaded in for painting on this. In this case, it's not showing them. If it doesn't, remember, you can always go to the red checkerboard down here. I always find this is kind of the easiest way to do it for me. Go to the red checkerboard, kind of right in your properties menu over here, red checkerboard way down here. And you can click new there. And then it brings this up, right? And what you can do is you can go to open, because we don't actually want to create a new texture. We want to open up some already existing images that we have that we could paint with, right? We've created a texture that we're painting, but you can actually paint with textures into another texture, right? You can paint images into another image. I know it's kind of weird, but it's true, right? So of course I can go to stencils if I wanted to use kind of some of these different ones here. These are just some ones I have just for the sake of having for you guys. I think I'll grab this one just for it to be a bit different. Some we haven't really used yet. Open image. And now this is available, right? If we go up to texture here, you'll see it's actually the currently active one. Now, remember, if you go to, remember your white screwdriver, white wrench right here at the very top of properties. It's kind of your other stuff there, right? It gives you your brush controls here. Now, if we have viewplane on, right? So texture, we've got our texture loaded in here. Mapping is set to viewplane, right? By default, it's usually set to tiled, but I like viewplane for what I'm about to do. So we click on the little mapping menu here, go to viewplane. Remember, this will usually be kind of a white checkerboard if there's nothing in there. In this case, you'll see the actual image. It's small, but you'll see it. You click on that, and any textures you've loaded in will be there, right? So that's active, viewplane. Now remember, with viewplane, you'll see very distinctly, it's just painting the texture right on, right? So it's just kind of painting it right on there. If I get to like a section here where you don't see as much noise, it's just taking that texture and it's just stamping it down, stamping it down. So it's kind of like I paint and it applies it, 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 right? And that's what that spacing controls, right? If we go to stroke spacing, and I know we saw this in the other video, but it never hurts to reinforce it, and I turn up to like say 120, you'll see the spacing better, right? You see how it actually gives you kind of distinct space between them. And you see how basically it drops the texture as a small texture drop. That's what viewplane does. It kind of drops it, drops it, drops it, drops it, drops it based on the brush size. And spacing controls that. And if you're just looking for kind of a good general noise, you know, kind of a low spacing number of like say 10%, which is the default, will allow you to kind of get in here pretty quickly and easily and just kind of add this low level noise. But remember, there's other ways to texture this, and you could combine these, right? You could do a lot of this as kind of a low level noise, right? So I can easily come in here and do a lot of low-level noise for it. So this could be a pretty fast way to kind of give us just some kind of color texture effect, right? So one of those ways we could get is kind of drop a bunch in there. Now, of course, one of the cool things we could do is go back up to texture, and we could switch the mapping type, right? That's viewplane. So viewplane really just takes the image and it just basically drops it down as you move the brush, right? It applies it, it applies it, it applies it, basically right on top of each other. So it kind of creates this general kind of low-level kind of noise texture, but it uses an image with certain color values, so it can still be pretty neat. And that's what spacing controls in your stroke. But if I go to mapping viewplane and I change to stencil, the bottom one, right? Viewplane's kind of the top one. Stencil's the bottom one. You see when I turn stencil on, it actually shows the image, right? See the image actually shows up here. Now, right mouse button moves it. Shift right mouse button scales it, although I usually grab at the edges, right? If you try to do it in the middle, it can kind of be a little touchy. So I hold on shift right mouse button at the edges to kind of scale, and control right mouse button will rotate it, right? So right mouse button moves it, control right mouse button rotates it. I usually kind of grab at the edges to kind of have better control over it. Shift right mouse button scales. Now you'll notice alt right mouse button will not zoom anymore. I myself personally changed it to kind of have mud boxes quick key for it, which was S for stencil. So kind of you could pick whatever other quick key you want in the quick key area. You can't really do it through normal quick key stuff, so you'd actually have to go to like edit, preferences, key map, and then you have to look for it in here to be like, I want to say it's like 3D view or something like that. And then you can go to like texture paint, image paint stuff. And you see how you can kind of start to find stencil brush controls in here, right? So you can kind of see how it's showing those quick keys here, and you can change it. In this case, though, scroll wheel will zoom, though. So if need be, right, you can always use scroll wheel to zoom it in a little bit or out, right? Or you could temporarily turn stencil off if you really need to. But you'll notice it's actually going to paint exactly the image as we see it. My brush size doesn't matter, right, because it's not stamping that down, but it's painting exactly the image we see. I'll turn my strength up a bit for this. And you see how it's painting the image exactly as we see it? So like if I have this like dark spot right here, right? So there's kind of a dark spot in the image. If I hold down right mouse button and move it down, you see how I can paint exactly that dark spot right there? So this is one of the cool things, one of the neat differences that stencil gives you over your kind of more normal view plane is that you're painting exactly the image itself, right? The image is there, right mouse button moves it, shift right mouse button scales it, control right mouse button rotates it. And so you paint exactly the image you see regardless of the image itself. You'll notice too, if you paint too much from one view, you might get stretching or slight artifacting. That's because remember, you're painting from the view itself. And so any polygons that face away from the view can sometimes get like almost like a glancing blow paint, and it gets weird. So you do have to be careful with your brush size and the view you're painting from. But you'll see that there is a truly distinct kind of difference between view plane and stencil, right? Stencil, you're painting the exact image exactly as you see it, right? It's up, you can move it, you could rotate it, you could scale it. You could paint exactly whatever part you want of it, right? So like say I wanted, maybe I wanted that big area a lot larger. So I hold down shift right mouse button, right? Shift right mouse button, I can get that dark area really big here. And you see I can kind of paint that whole little dark kind of parts of that texture right there. So this is one of those things where as you right mouse button move it, as you shift right mouse button scale it down, you can paint exactly the part of the texture you want, where you want it, right? So there really is a distinct difference between stencil and view plane, right? View plane, you're just basically, it just drops the image down based on your brush size, and it drops it continuously. And spacing lets it have more spacing between the dropping of that image on the model. Stencil, you actually see the image, and you paint just whatever part of the image you want, right? So your brush size doesn't actually matter, right? It's just painting that section of the image that's underneath it. So they really do have distinctly different kind of personalities, right, for how the painting works between Viewplane and Stencil. So if you're really looking to get exactly the image and even have very specific parts and very specific sections, use Stencil as your mapping type. If you're looking for kind of just a more general low-level kind of noise, right, using an image, Viewplane. So those are kind of cool, right? If you want to turn your texture off, the X, right? It's kind of in this texture menu, X, and it turns it off. I'm going to save this. Remember, if you go up to image here, you'll see there's an asterisk now. It's because this texture has not been saved, so I'll go to save it. And of course, you could save your scene. That saves a texture in it. And that's just kind of a little bit more reinforcement of what I wanted to show you guys for stencils and Viewplane, right? The nice thing is we've seen those for sculpting. We're seeing them for texture painting. What I wanted to do now is I wanted to paint one more little map type here, right? So I'm going to go to the material node, right? So I'm going to go to the kind of red sphere, click on that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the roughness section, right? So we're scrolling down because, you know, kind of our base color's got a texture plugged in there. Our normal map's got a texture plugged in down here, right? But there is an area called roughness. Roughness, right? Now, I'm going to turn metallic up as a slider a little bit, right? So remember, you can actually control these material properties just as a slider. So I could take that metallic from 0 up to a higher number, and you see how you can get pretty metallic, particularly if you've got your Eevee material preview rendering on, right? I'll go a little more metallic than this, I think. But what I want to do is I want to paint the roughness for this model. So I'm going to actually click on the gray dot for roughness. And that, of course, will bring up these, right? This. You might want to scroll up, right? Your scroll wheel will scroll through here. Although, see the triangle? You can always move the triangle up, go to the triangles, or go to the top of the browser. And I'm going to go to image texture again, right? Image texture. And you see how in the roughness area, it now has that open and new feature. So I can click on new. I'm going to call this Crab Gear Rough. And of course, I want it to be 2048 pixels, so I'll go 2048. Click on it. 2048. All right. And if I remember correctly, I feel like roughness actually inverses the black and white, right? Black is on and white is off. So in this case, we're going to have blank, but I'm going to click on color. And I feel like I'm going to go turn it up to like kind of white. Hit OK. And there we go, right? So in this case, when I create that one, I wanted to pick the color white. Now, it's not going to be available if I go back up to, say, my white screwdriver, white wrench up here. It's not there yet, right? You won't actually see it available quite yet in here. That's because, remember, we want to kind of go and grab this bar here, move it over a little bit. And you'll notice it's still kind of using the crab gear color here. So remember, you could go right to the kind of like little kind of triangle, circle thing right next to crab gear color. Click on that. And you'll notice there is crab gear rough. So we can click on it and highlight that. I'm going to go to image, right? It's like right next to it, right? So you can always make this area a little bit bigger, right? You can always browse for all your different textures right here, right there. And I'm going to go to image, and I'm going to go save as, right? And the defaults are fine, and it's going to call it Crab Gear Rough, so I'll hit save as image as. And now I can make this smaller, right? And I'm going to hit Control S to save it in the scene as well, because now you'll see, so I kind of always take that extra little step. If you don't have B-Painter, you kind of have to take these extra little steps. I just usually go over here, make sure it's highlighted, save it, right, so that it's fully created and saved properly. And when it's saved properly, you will see it here and available now, right? So if I want to work on color, I can click on color. If I want to work on normal, I can click on normal. If I want to click on rough, I can work on rough. With that selected, what I want to do now is I want to go in here and I want to say go to a dark gray color, right? And I want to turn that strength up 100. And what I can now do here is I can go kind of paint right in this area. Come on, black's on, mix is on, what's going on? Brush, let's see. Viewplane, texture mask, stroke. We should be seeing that. What's going on there? What is going on? What am I missing for that? Should be showing up. Go to material here. Metallic is turned up. It should be. What's going on there? Did I plug into something else? Doesn't look like it. Let me double check here really quick. That it didn't get plugged in anywhere else weird. No, it's just in roughness. Oh, it might not be using the UVs though. Let's see here. Doesn't really need to though. It should be able to see those properly. Yeah, that is weird. Why is it not showing up? Everything's properly in there. Let's make sure it's crab gear rough over here. There we go. Got the brush. What is going on here? Should need to be white. Yeah, what is going on? What did I break? Should be totally painting for us. What is going on here? Grab the other colors selected, strokes on, nothing on texture mask, nothing on viewplane. Something is not working for us here, and it should be. Oh, no rendering engine set to Eevee. I don't need bloom on to show the metal. What's going on here? It's plugged into the right channel. Should be using the proper UVs. I don't think it needs that set up. Don't think that needs to be on. What is going on here? Oh, that's weird. Everything should be okay here. What is going on? Mix is fine. Brush is fine. Seeing an update in there. Why are we not seeing an update here? Okay, that's bizarre. All right, well, you know what? I'm going to come back to that because I do not what's going on there. I'm usually doing this with BPainter myself, but I could not tell you what's going on there. That should be working just fine. All right, so we'll end there, and we'll make another video for the metal painting for that. That just went weird, and I'd rather not screw around with it too much if I don't have to. All right,